All right, welcome to the Cool Real Estate Podcast. I'm Jasper Cool here with my dad, Mark Cool. And on this podcast, we share real world insights, tools, and strategies to help you succeed in your real estate investing business. You'll get both of our perspectives from our two respective businesses each week, and we cover wholesaling, wholesaling houses, vacant land, building a real estate business, and more. So today we're going to be going over how to make sure your deals close smoothly and on time. That's something that we each have a lot of experience with. And so we're going to go over that. We're going to go over some deal stories and just kind of tools and tips as we usually do from our past week in business. So really just wanted to jump into the conversation, kind of going over, I guess, best practices, and we can both kind of list maybe, I don't know what you think, like 3 to 5 best practices that can help you close your deals more smoothly. So I can jump into it, or you can jump in. What do you want to do?
I can just riff on it a little bit. We talked about this a little bit before we jumped on here, but I think what we're talking about here is making sure your deals close smoothly. So that has a lot to do with your lawyer, right? There's basically three parties you're dealing with if you're doing an assignment. It's your lawyer and your buyer and your seller.
Mhm.
Of course, if you're doing a JV, then you have your JV partner, right? um, but yeah, so I think I'll just list a few and then I'll let you go. But one of the things is just being really clear up front with your attorney on what your desired closing date is, what type of deal it is, because your attorney might not always know that it's an assignment deal. So like, here's the property address. This is an assignment of contract deal. Our assignment fee will be, this much money, or the difference between the, buyer's purchase price and the seller's purchase price. Here's the buyer's contact information. Here's the seller's contact information in the contract. Let us know if you need anything else. We're shooting for this closing date. Please confirm that you can do it by that date. And that's one, is just being really clear about all the information.
Mhm.
Another one we bumped into last week, and I can't remember if I shared this deal story last week, but the lawyer lost the EMD for the buyer. Um, Maybe we talked about this offline. I don't know, but
Mhm.
the closing attorney couldn't find the EMD for the buyer, and the buyer was very upset and flustered by it because, they were not a professional like a builder or anything. They were just buying a piece of land that they're going to build on, that they're very excited about, and got a money order and sent it to the attorney, and then the attorney was like, waited 3 weeks until we were ready to close, and then told us they couldn't find the EMD. Um, and so I guess the tip on this one is to make sure you tell your buyers, if they are new buyers and not professional buyers like we work with a lot, who just wire their funds into the attorney. If you're sending a check or dropping off a check at the attorney's office, make sure you label it very clearly, the property address, our company name, like if you're working with my company, your name, everything, all the information. And actually, my operations guy, said, "Hey, why don't we just do a form to give to buyers?" I think we talked about this last week, so I won't
Mhm.
belabor it. But just make sure that your buyer is really clear about their EMD if they're a new buyer or if they're not really experienced. And other than that, Jasper, you'll probably touch on this, but just really following up with all the parties, the seller, the buyer, and the closing attorney consistently to make sure everything is on schedule and closing on time. And we get a fair number of sellers who don't know what they're doing either because they haven't sold many properties. So you really have to educate them and walk them through. But I'll leave that to you a little bit, Jasper, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's great advice. I just want to recap a couple of things you said. First of all, the introductory email is very important. And when I'm saying that, it's the introductory email to the closing attorney or your title company. That's very important just to kind of set the standard up front, give them all the information like you mentioned, and especially mention the closing date that you're shooting for. That's very important to mention that right up front so that everyone knows exactly where you're trying to close and hopefully they can kind of process things accordingly. But yeah, I love what you said about kind of making it really easy for all the parties too. I think that's very important. And especially sellers, sometimes the buyers that we're working with are more professional and, they've done this hundreds of times. So it's not as big of a deal, but especially for sellers, you want to make it very streamlined and easy for them. So just a couple things we do. First of all, when we send the DocuSign, we include like a closing FAQ, so frequently asked questions. And it's just like a 2.5 page document or something. And I just came up with a bunch of questions that, we've had over the years from sellers. Like one, for example, in North Carolina, it's a marital state. So even if your spouse is not on the deed, they still need to sign. And also, if you have an ex-spouse, but you haven't actually had a divorce. Like a lot of people get really frustrated about that, but if you have an ex-spouse and you haven't legally divorced with a very clear, divorce agreement that splits your assets or whatever, they still need to sign. And so that's very clear in our closing FAQ. Obviously, not all sellers are going to read that, but we do include that every time we send a DocuSign out. It's right there, below their signature. It's right there for them to read. And they also obviously get a copy from DocuSign once they sign. That automatically sends them a copy of that. So we do that to hopefully encourage them to look into that on their own. But then also, we're there with an introductory call with our sellers, once we do get under contract. And so thankfully that's not me who's doing that anymore, but basically we're just reaching out to them, kind of letting them know how the process is going to go from here. And if they do have a mortgage, we ask them for that information right up front so that we can go ahead and forward that to our closing attorney. And basically we want to make it as easy as possible for the sellers, but we also want to try to do the same thing for the attorneys, even though like we don't want to do their job for them. We want to hopefully get some assistance from them on the title search and all that stuff, but we want to make it easy for them to help us essentially. Because what I've noticed is that some attorneys can kind of get like, I don't know the word for it, but I think some attorneys can kind of be aloof, maybe that's the right word. And they like don't want to kind of do the menial task or whatever. And so like for us, when we provide them with a mortgage payoff up front, we provide them with a seller checklist because most attorneys have like a checklist they want sellers to fill out. So we do that on our end. And then when we send the introductory email, we're like, here's the seller's name, just like you said. So here's the seller, here's the buyer, here's the closing date. Also, here's their mortgage payoff, and here's the seller checklist for your office. And so right up front, we're just setting the standard like, hey, we gave you everything you need. Let us know, obviously, if you need anything else, but like, here's literally everything you need. Go ahead and start the title search, all that stuff. So I've noticed since we started doing that, it's been much more smoother on closings. And that's really a recent addition is doing the payoff and the seller checklist for them. So ever since I hired Giselle, she's been taking care of that, which has been awesome. And then also, throughout the process, like you said, just following up consistently with all parties. We like to follow up at minimum once per week with seller, buyer, and closing attorney, just to make sure that, everyone's knows what's going on. Everyone knows the closing date we're shooting for. And last thing that we didn't mention is the lender. So if a buyer is working with a lender, I like to get that information directly up front. And a lot of times a lender can delay closings. And so if you can get the information directly from the buyer's lender and you can just include them in the email thread yourself, or just reach out to them in a separate email yourself and just kind of follow up with them, add that like as a fourth party that you want to follow up with weekly is a buyer's lender. And then typically, we actually have a checklist in Podio, but we have a seller checklist and a buyer checklist in our Podio transactions app. And so basically for the seller checklist, it just has all those steps I kind of mentioned. So first step is reaching out to the seller for just an intro call. Next step, send them the seller checklist. Next step, send them the mortgage payoff or ask them for the mortgage payoff. And then we send them like a copy of our contract. And we have just a bunch of steps, obviously. And then same thing on the buyer side. And so once we send the buyer a contract and it gets signed, then it goes back to my transaction coordinator. And she has a full checklist for that too. So first step, obviously, is getting the signed contract. Next step, sending that contract to the attorney. Next step, make sure the buyer sends in their EMD. So you touched on that. But if they're a professional buyer, you can just, it could be as simple as just sending them the wiring information and just following up with them. Did you get it? Did you send in your wire? If they're maybe their first time buying, then I think your idea is great to send them a full form, make it very easy for them. But just making sure they do send in that EMD, because pretty much the deal is not sold in our eyes until that EMD is confirmed and in. And so we make that very clear as well.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So just like we have a closing FAQ for the sellers, we have we call it closing policies that we include in our buyer contract. And so when we send them a contract, we have a additional document right below the assignment, kind of same thing, but it just goes over, I think it's like 10 lines or 10 bullets, and it just goes over what we expect from them. And one of the lines is very clear, which is that this property is not considered yours until we have your signed EMD receipt and the closing attorney has confirmed receipt of your EMD. And so we make that very clear for them that like if they're kind of trying to play around and maybe wholesale to someone else or something and they don't send in their EMD, we have full rights to accept another offer from another buyer if they're not going to send in their EMD. So we make that very clear for them. And then kind of some of the other things that
Do you give them a deadline for the when their EMD needs to be in by?
Yeah. And we switched it. So I used to have it like EMD needs to be sent or something by a certain date. Now I have it where typically we do 12 p.m. the following day. So if it's a weekend, I'll give them like for example, if we sold a deal on Friday, I'll give them till Monday. But if it's during the week and we're sending a contract on Monday, I'll just give them till Tuesday because you and I both know it only takes 5 or 10 minutes to send a wire, so there's no excuse really. And so we just ask them by that deadline to send us proof of wire. So it doesn't have to be confirmed or received by the attorney, but we just want to know that you sent it by that deadline. So, like I said, we
Yeah.
typically do 12 p.m. the following business day for our buyers. But yeah,
2 days because we have more. I think we have more individual buyers than you do. So we give them 2 days because a lot of these people are getting a cashier's check and dropping it off or mailing it. So we want to see like a confirmation of mail or, you know, verification they've dropped it off with the attorney. We want a picture of it, something like that. But I think we have quite a few more individual buyers than you do. So we have a
yeah,
different policy. But yeah,
yeah.
just curious to see what yours was. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty much it, but just kind of making sure you set clear expectations with seller and buyer up front, and then just following up with the parties throughout. And then we also have, like I said, the buyer checklist. And another thing that we like to do is make sure you request a HUD statement at least 48 hours before closing. We like to do that just so we know that everything's on track. And at that point, if the attorney can't give you the HUD statement, typically it's because they're waiting on the buyer's lender or they're waiting on something else. And so then at least 2 days before closing, so you can kind of try to get on top of that and not delay things. And then I guess the last thing that I would mention is just signing appointments. So a lot of our sellers and buyers are closing remotely. And so you can use a service like 123notary.com if you're trying to help them out yourself. There's another service called RAH Signings. So rahsignings.com is a great one. And third option is just to have your title company or attorney handle that. And so some attorneys will just handle that for you, and you just let them know, hey, this seller or this buyer needs to close remotely. Can you please coordinate a mobile notary? And a lot of them are happy to do that for you. So, but just one thing to mention with that, if you're going to do that, make sure that that appointment is set no later than 1 business day prior. And a lot of times you want to set it 2 business days prior to allow time for overnighting those documents. And so
You've
if
got
you're doing a mobile
potential.
notary, what's
Yeah.
that?
No, you've got potential notary error, like they don't get the documents in the FedEx drop soon enough, and you've got potential scheduling error where they try and schedule with the seller, but then the seller changes it, and then they
Yeah.
schedule it for later or the next day. So, yeah, 2 days is ideal, really, when
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, so that's a great thing to mention too, because if you schedule a mobile notary for your closing day, you're not closing on your closing day. You're closing a day or two after that. So,
Yeah.
but I think that's pretty much it. So I know I went
Well,
kind
let's
of,
just hit on a little bit what I mean. We've talked on being preemptive, but just talk on what are the major uh, factors that delay deals, right? So just looking at it from the other way around, like title is one of the biggest ones, right? Like if there's something wrong with the title on your deal, that's going to often cause delays. And so we just were talking about this offline, how some attorneys, when you give them the deal and you do everything Jasper said and you break it all down and you give it to them in an email, some of them will say, "Hey, we got your deal." They'll send you a confirmation, which is another thing. Like, get a confirmation from the attorney. We received this. We're good to work on it. We can go by that closing date. Like, you want to get that confirmation, or that closing date sounds good. Everything good. But a lot of attorneys will peek at the title early on. Like after they get it, they'll be like, "Hey, everything looks good so far on this title. We should be good to go. We'll have to do it more in depth." But then a lot of attorneys will wait until the week of closing or the day before closing or something to look at the title, and then you find out, oh, there's another error that needs to be tracked down, or there's no estate was filed for this will or whatever it is. There's a bunch of different things. There's the survey was it needs a survey because the boundary lines are unclear in the deed, or there's like 10 different little title things that could happen. But so that's one, and I guess the only way you can really get ahead of that one is to find an attorney who will peek at the title early or who will start on it early, or ask them to do it if you have a suspicion that this one might be an unusual title situation. If you know that there are multiple brothers and sisters, or there's a divorce, or there's a death and a will and that kind of stuff, like, hey, attorney, we know that this was a will. We're not sure about it. Could you just take a peek at it early just to make sure we're on track to close on time? Something like that, right? So that would be one major delay factor for us inland. The other things are, like a perk test or a survey, if the buyer is getting a survey or a perk test, and then they're dependent on the surveyor's schedule or the county, environmental health department doing an inspection of the soil for the perk test, or an independent soil scientist, those things can cause delays. So then those are other people that you have to be on top of and make sure that, like Jasper was saying about the lender, so there's lender, there's title, right? And then there's things with the property like inspections, right? With house inspections or with land, these things take longer. A surveyor can often be booked 6 weeks out, and so can a soil scientist. So you want to head these things off and try and get those people scheduled as soon as possible. Similar to what Jasper mentioned with the mobile notary, like sometimes when a lawyer is not on the ball or we just want to be in charge of the transaction, we book the mobile notary for the remote, the seller who's closing remotely. Sometimes we do the same thing with soil scientists or surveyors just because we have people we know will do things in a timely way, and we don't want to rely on the buyer or the seller to be booking those appointments and getting it done by the closing date. So those are a few I can think of. Any other factors that cause delays that we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, those are great points, and definitely something to think about. Like, for example, taking charge. You know what you just said, but for example, like I've referred a lot of buyers to a couple of different lenders that I like to work with because sometimes we'll have a buyer come in and they're like, "Yeah, like I want this deal. I can close in 30 days because my lender takes 30 days." And I'm like, "Well, my lender takes 10 days. So can you just like look at them? Do they have comparable fees?" And so that's a great point what you said. Just taking control of certain aspects like the surveyor, soil scientist, getting your own mobile notary. You and I both work with some of the same mobile notaries who are very good and trustworthy. And so sometimes it's nice to have that kind of person that is going to get it done on time, drop the docs off, like it's going to be smooth.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a great tip. The only other thing, I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole of title issues, but some of the things that I've noticed that really cause delays are like deeds of trust, for example. I've run into a lot of those. And so that's one thing that we're trying to nip in the bud on the intro call is like ask the seller about the payoff. And if they say something like, oh yeah, I paid off my mortgage, but I don't have the payoff, that's immediate red flag. Then I mean, it's not necessarily the seller's fault, but that's going to be an issue. And typically, at least in North Carolina, there's kind of just one main way around it, which is for the attorney to file an attorney satisfaction. But to do that, they have to wait 30 days, the time frame for the lender to reply to them. And so basically, we've run into that a lot. I have one with that right now. That's why I'm smiling. But just if you notice anything like that up front in the seller intro call, then definitely, like you said, just jump on the attorney up front, let them know so that they can, start immediately. And then another thing you mentioned that I love is just asking the seller also on that intro call, if you have a transaction coordinator or if it's just yourself, asking them just, point blank, if your acquisition team didn't already do this, are there any errors involved? Do you have like an estranged spouse or siblings or anyone else who needs to sign? Just so you can get all that information up front and get in front of it. That's super helpful. But yeah, sometimes you'll do all that and still random title issues might pop up, like an unrecorded easement or just random stuff might pop
Yeah,
up.
there are liens, there are
Yeah.
contractors liens, and uh, it's not always, you have to, in North Carolina, at least where we're working, you actually have to call to get liens. You can't just go online and search them on a register of deeds. You have to call like whoever it is. I guess it's a register of deeds still, but one of our dispositions people does that, calls for the liens. And we didn't do that early on. And then we'd get to closing a couple of times and it's like, oh, the lawyer finds a lien on it for $5,000 or $10,000, right? And it's like 3 days before closing, and you have to negotiate the lien down or get it paid or renegotiate with the seller. So calling in and finding out if there are any liens or judgments. Sometimes, that, and again, we don't have to go down a rabbit hole. This will be the last one I'll say, but in urban settings, dealing with vacant land, sometimes the city will clear a lot because neighbors have been complaining about a nuisance and it's a vacant lot and the weeds are high and there's trash on it. So the city will go in there and clear everything and clean it up, and then they'll assess a big charge for that, like
Yeah.
$3,000 or something.
Yeah.
And the seller might not even know about it, like, or they might have missed the notice that they were getting assessed a charge if they didn't clean it up. And so then you get to closing, and if you don't know about it, there's like, oh, $3,000 to clean it up, and then they bill you after that too to do it again and again.
Yeah.
So these things are just stuff to get out ahead of. And since we've done a bunch of deals, it's good to throw it out there. But yeah, I guess that's probably enough for now with that topic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless
As you can tell, Mark and I have dealt with a lot of title issues over the years, so kind of a sensitive topic. But just to put a bow on it, like the liens thing is a great point. And if you do come across those liens, a lot of time, if, at least if they're at the county or city level, they can be negotiated down, judgments as well. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind. A lot of times you can give them a call yourself, or you can have a seller call them, or maybe do a three-way or something. And a lot of times you can get those things negotiated down. And sometimes that means more profit for you. You know, if you're the one doing it yourself, maybe you can negotiate that with the seller. Like, hey, if I can get 10,000 off this, can we split the difference? You know, maybe you get five, they get five or something. Or, you know, you're just making the seller more money. So either way, it's a win-win, but don't just accept those at face value. You know, a lot of times you can negotiate those down. So
Yeah. Good point.
but yeah, so hopefully everyone enjoyed that. If you did, just drop a comment below, and we can always go deeper on title issues and stuff in a future episode. But now I want to switch gears to deal breakdowns. And so what we're going to do is we're each going to go over a deal from the past week, and you're going to get kind of just a real world insight to kind of some of the things we just shared on title issues and closing deals and stuff. And so, do you want to dive in with that and share a deal?
Yeah, yeah, we closed one this week and it was a doozy. And so I've got some stuff to share about it. It's this was a vacant lot, and it came from a direct mail campaign. So we just started doing direct mail again this year, and we're doing the version of direct mail that's a check letter. So it's when you get the piece of mail. I don't have one handy, but it's the one with like a window and it looks like a check inside. And so you open it up and there's actual, like, it looks like a real check, and it's like, we're ready to make this a real, real check, and it's got a price on it. And we're basically taking like the assessed value of the property and just going 50% and sending that out. And then people call you up and go, well, I'd be interested in this, but I need more money or whatever. People call you. That's the great thing about
Yeah.
it. So we got a call, and it was like a week after the direct mail dropped. The seller called in and talked to my acquisitions manager and signed a contract the same day that she called in. They negotiated price, or maybe she signed for the price. This is something I don't know because I haven't talked to our acquisitions manager about it. Like, I don't even know if they negotiated or if she just accepted the check that we sent her. She might have just accepted the check amount. And so anyway, she signed a contract the same day. and it
That's
was
awesome.
and it was a great price for us. It was like half of tax value. So she just signed. And so we sold it the next day. So we got the lead, got the contract the same day, sold the deal the next day to one of our buyers who buys a lot of deals from us, and with a good profit. It was like a 15K profit on a vacant lot. And so we're stoked. And then the buyer said, hey, we want to close this as soon as possible. So we reached out to an attorney who we know does things fast, and we're like, hey, can you guys close this like next week? And they're like, yeah, let's jump on it. And they did what we just asked. They looked at the title right away and they were like, title looks good, everything looks, like this will be a go. And we scheduled the thing for like the Monday. I think we signed the contract on like Wednesday with the seller, or Tuesday with the seller, sold it on Wednesday, scheduled closing for Monday.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, everything was looking really good.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I made some notes to myself. So I'm going to look down at my pad because I'm trying to get the chronological order here. So direct mail lead, we got the contract the same day, sold it in one day, scheduled the closing within a week. And then the seller reached out, I think, like the day after we sold it, to my acquisitions manager and said, I'm canceling, with you guys. I don't want to do this
Oh
deal.
my gosh.
Got another buyer. Yeah. And so, the whole team is excited because we're like, we got a contract. We sold the next day. It's a good profit. And our minimum profit on a land deal is 8. That's the lowest we'll go is 8,000. And we really want to be up at 10 or above. So we're at 15. We're good. We're very happy and excited. And like, we're closing this fast, and we had like a drought. So it was just a big uplift for the team, like this whole thing. And then boom, it's a punch in the gut. The seller goes, I'm not working with you guys. And I've got it. And then, my acquisitions manager reaches out and it's like, what's going on? I've got another offer for 15,000. Right.
Um,
And we had it under contract for 5.5K. So, so then my acquisitions manager is like, hey, can you talk to this person? Because she, she's the seller's, angry and not going to work with us and all this stuff. I'm trying to see if I can pull up the text thread. So, so I was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And I call her and she doesn't answer, of course. And, so I'm like, great. It's a ghosted seller situation, which we've
Mm,
talked about on this podcast. Like sellers, once they decide they're going with somebody else or they don't want to work with you, they just don't answer any calls. Right. And so I'm like, okay, great. Now we've got this going on. And so I started texting with the seller. Let me see if I can find this. I'm going to just give me just a second. I'm going to scroll through this because it was pretty good. It was the whole negotiation that we do over the phone, but uh, it was on text. So, so I'm sorry, this is terrible podcasting, but so what happened is we're trying to find out who the other buyer was. I guess first we got really paranoid, right? Because we had only sent it out to two buyers. So I got in like really, pumped up mode, and I'm like, okay, who are the two buyers we sent it to? One of these guys went around us, right? I'm going
yeah.
to call them right now. Who are they? And so I had to, I had to calm down a little bit, and then I had the acquisitions manager ask her like, who's your other buyer, and she said her real estate broker that she used to work with, or that sold her house, right? And I'm like, well, that's not ethical for a real estate broker to come in and do that. So then I'm like, well, who's the broker? And she wouldn't tell her, but then she forwarded our contract to the broker. So then I got the number, um, the broker, and I called them up, and I was like, hey, are you working with a seller? And she played it really coy, and she was like, no, blah blah blah. I just told her to talk to a lawyer, and then but she said some stuff in the conversation, the broker, that was like, oh, she's totally reviewed the whole contract and is advising her on all these points, because she said stuff like, she told me she was staying out of it and that, da da da, but then she referenced the price and she referenced something else that was in the contract, and yeah, she was trying to deny it and be coy about it. And then she turned it on me and she started trying to come after us about our integrity, or our whether we were adhering to the real estate law. And she's like asking me questions like, are you negotiating on your own behalf, or are you negotiating on somebody else's behalf? Because we can talk about the law in a minute. And then she asked me something, are you a licensed real estate agent? And then she asked me something else, and I was just like, I started going, I'm not sure what you're asking me. And then she was like, well, and she repeated it, and I was like, I'm not sure I understand. She repeated it again. I was like, not clear on what you're asking. And she started to get frustrated. And I was like, and then she was like, oh, okay, I got it. And she realized I wasn't going to answer her question because she was trying to corner me into giving her answers. And I
Yeah.
wasn't sure about the law, about wholesaling. So I had to review the law and everything. Anyway, so that happened. And then I started texting with the seller. Um, here's what I said. It's Mark with I've Got a Hammer. That's just my company name. Give me a call when you get a chance, or let me know when it's a good time to reach you. We've opened escrow on this deal already and have deposited earnest money. Let's see what we can work out. And then she comes back to me. Hello, Mark. Please email me a copy of the executed contract for my attorney's review. And so then I'd say, hey, I believe Carissa texted you a link, and you should also have a copy in your email, blah, 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 if you search this and that. And then the response I get back, hello, sir or madam, please forward the executed contract to my email. So I have an email signature a text signature on my text, because we have Just Call, and it has my name, my title, my phone number, my company name, all this stuff. So she says,
Yeah.
hello, sir or madam. So then I respond, hey, name, did you search your email for PandaDoc? Check your spam. And then that was then I had to follow up the next day. It's Mark checking back. Did you show the agreement to your attorney? Let me know where things are at. And at this time, just figure she's ghosting. She's going to go with somebody else with another offer. Blah blah blah. And then I get back, hello, Mark, all caps. I do not wish to move forward with your company, all caps. And then I go, uh, hi, I'm Linda. I spoke with a broker. It sounds like she was offering to list your property for 15K. That's not the same as paying you cash. That's listing it and hoping someone will pay your price sometime down the road. We still want to move forward with a deal. Is there a number that we can pay you in cash next week that would make this deal work for you? So I'm doing the negotiation I would normally do on the phone on text, because she won't pick up the phone. Uh,
Yeah.
Mark, the only number that I would accept would be 15K. I can wait for the market to sell for 20K. As I told Creasa, I'm not pressed for the money, but I won't be ripped off. This, Mr. Mark, is the only number I will accept. And then she says, you asked what number would work for me, and you have it, sir. And then I say, thank you. You did sign a contract with us for 5.5K. I'm trying to be flexible. So I'm just trying to tweak a little bit that you did sign a contract. This is a legally binding contract, which is something we
Yeah.
when they try and back out. And then she says, Mark, you probably already have a buyer for at least 20K. What do you call middle ground? And so I say, I don't like to give a number, but I'm just trying to save this deal at this point. So I say, hi, Melinda, would you be willing to do 10K? And I know she's not going to do 10K, but, uh, and then she says, who is this? Is this Mark? Are you offering 10K? uh, Let me say this, pay me 11K and I will sell, not a penny less. And I want this all caps bad experience to be over. That's it. And you are still coming out ahead of property that you never owned. Do you accept that? And then I think I turn around here and I try and anchor her a little bit. Hi, Melinda. I would love to change this from bad to good. Teresa was under the impression that your communication was positive. Teresa's my acquisitions manager. Would you mind talking on the phone for a minute to see if we can improve your experience? I'm trying to get her on the phone to lock this down rather than doing it over text. Not now. Do you accept 11K? Hi, yes, we will do 11K. Thank you for working with us. Since you are in the town she's in, and I'm in my town, uh, I'm not saying the names and stuff, and we can't shake on it. I would love to chat by phone to make sure you have the best possible experience from now until closing. The next step will be for us to send you an addendum for e-sign to lock in the increased payoff. Are you good with that? Thank you. I want this over as soon as possible. I will be available to talk in 30 minutes. So after that, I was able to get her on the phone. And I was one of those things where I'm holding the phone out here because she's, really upset and really, and she got really, what ended up happening is she got really worked up. She got really wound up by this broker about how wholesalers are evil and we're not even owning their property. We're just making money and taking advantage of her and, on and on. And then we're not even legal. And like my acquisitions manager can't negotiate on my behalf if I'm the principal. And then she said that the acquisitions manager lied to her. And when she asked her point blank if we were going to flip this property, she said no. And, all this stuff. She's just worked up. So I just thank you for sharing this with me. I really appreciate you getting on the phone. I appreciate you telling me what's happening. We'll do our best to improve. Just like doing that kind of reflective, and thank you. And I appreciate it. And I was probably on the phone with her for 10 minutes and it was one of these calls, where a lot of it was here. And then I was like, okay. And then finally she was a little bit calmer, but she was still agitated, but she did calm down. And I felt like we got to some common ground on the phone. So that was, that's one of the lessons here is like, I was able to negotiate the price that still worked for us because we're selling it for 20. So we ended up making 9, which is not 15, but it's still 9. And, but I think the getting her on the phone helped really lock it down. So, and then after that, it was just a process of like staying on top of it. She signed the e-sign for the addendum the same day. And then we were closing it was weekend in between. So it was like 4 days until we were closing on the Monday. And I walked her through the closing process and what was going to happen next and, what to expect and set up the mobile notary for her. That she signed all the documents with the mobile notary on Friday. We were closing on Monday, which was great. She did that. And then the last big hurdle for me was, is she going to sign this HUD? Because she's going to see that we're selling it for 20, and she's getting 11 and we're getting 9, but she did sign the HUD. And that was the last big thing. The big piece of relief was like, I texted her, hey, the HUD's coming over, just let me know if you have any questions. The only thing you need to look at is the bottom right of page 1. It's going to have net to seller. It's going to have the 11,000 that we agreed on. Right. And that's what I always tell sellers is like, look at the bottom right of page 1. That's going to have the number we agreed on. Right. As long as that's good, you don't need to worry about anything else. And so she signed it. She asked me like, who's such and such, which was the person we're signing it to. And I said like, oh, that's our business partner. And then she signed it. And I was like, thank God. So then, the buyer, meantime, the buyer's like, oh, I didn't want to close. And this is like the previous week. She signed the HUD on Monday, but like on Thursday or Friday, the buyer's like, oh, Monday, that's really fast. We didn't want, and we're like, oh no. And so the buyer's like, well, we can close next Friday. And we had already told the seller Monday after I talked her down and got all this stuff. He's like, we can close next Friday. And I'm like, oh, no. You know, you need to close this. You know, you said you want to close this as soon as possible. We got it set up for Monday. You need to figure this out.
Yeah.
And to their credit, they did say they could do it by Tuesday at the latest and probably by Monday. And this is like Thursday or Friday of the previous week. And they did get the copy of the HUD, I think, on Friday. And then they got their money wired in by late Monday. And we were able to finalize the closing on Tuesday morning and get the seller her funds. So it was just crazy. You know, it was like a roller coaster for a few days, not only with the seller, but with the buyer. And I guess the takeaways for me are, you know, part of something is better than zero of nothing, right? So if you get a seller who is going to back out on you anyway, you might as well eat some crow and give them some more money and still make some money, right? And so I don't like that, and I hate it. It gets me really mad when a seller signs a contract and then says, "Oh, I'm not going to do it," you know, because it's like it is a legally binding contract.
Yeah.
You do have to do it. Like we could force you by law to do it, but as we've talked about in this podcast too, it's like doing the specific performance on these contracts with sellers is like it's just kind of a waste of time and money, really.
Yeah.
And Matt Larson, who's one of our mentors who we mentioned on here, he's just like, I don't even do it, you know. Like I've got a bunch of lawsuits in court, and every once in a while one closes, but it's just a waste of time and money. And for myself, you know, we have a specific performance case in court that's probably going on a year now. I think we might have filed it last April or something. So, and you got to give the lawyer a big retainer. So basically, when a seller does this, you have two options. You can file specific performance, or you can work with them, or you can threaten them, you know, like, hey, you signed a contract. And that works with some sellers. Some sellers will be like, oh, you're right, I did sign a legally binding contract. I don't want to be sued. Okay, well, I'll just do it, you know. Or you can appeal to their integrity, like, hey, you know, you said you'd sell it for this. Are you a person of your word? You know, do you do what you say you're going to do, or do you just do whatever? You know, do you have integrity? And you don't have to use those words, but that type of line of questioning. So in this case, the woman was adamant she was not going to do a deal with us. Our company was evil. She hated us, and we were, you know, we were bad. So felt like a victory to me to get her to come to the table with 11,000 and to sign everything. And so I guess that's the one takeaway. And then the other takeaway for me is just the real estate law and wholesaling in your state. And we know there are 2 or 3 states now where you have to have a real estate license to do wholesaling, right? It's Illinois, and do you remember the other ones?
I think it's Illinois. I think it's Washington State. I think it's South Carolina. There might be a couple more.
Okay. So it's like a handful of states where you have to have a real estate license to wholesale deals. And in any other state, you can wholesale deals legally, but you have to be a little bit careful, right? You can't represent yourself as someone who is representing the seller, for instance. Like if you're talking to buyers, you cannot say, I'm representing the seller. You cannot negotiate on the seller's behalf. That's the big one that this broker was trying to push on, is like negotiating on somebody's behalf. You have to say, we have an assignable contract to your buyer, or we have an equitable interest, or, something like that. And you have to say to the seller, we work with business partners to develop these properties, or we work with business partners to blah, 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 to rehab and sell and make a profit, that kind of thing. But you can't tell them, right, that you're going to, what is it? You can't tell the sellers. I don't know. I'm losing the thread on this one, but I guess you just have to be transparent with the seller if they ask you if you're signing the contract. It's not illegal to assign a contract as long as you're a principal. That's the seller side thing, is you have to be the principal. And this is the one I refreshed myself on, is as long as you are dealing with the seller as a principal, you are within the law in North Carolina to do an assignment of contract deal. And if you are the principal, you have the right legally to assign that contract. So the way it works for my company, and the way I realized that we were all in the clear with the allegations that were being thrown against us, is that if you have an LLC, anyone who is within the umbrella of the LLC can negotiate on behalf of the LLC as a principal, because the LLC is the principal. And so nobody can come to you and say, well, your acquisitions manager negotiated the deal and they were negotiating on your behalf, so that's not legal. No, that's not the case. Anyone in the team can negotiate on behalf of the LLC, and that LLC is the principal. So those are the two main law things in North Carolina. I don't know how it is in other states, but I just wanted to bring that out. So you can't tell buyers that you're representing the seller in North Carolina, and you must be the principal to assign a contract, with the seller. So if you don't have an LLC, then technically you can't have somebody else negotiate it for you and then give it to you to sell or something. So anyway, I think that's my deal story. Hopefully that wasn't too long-winded. I just wanted to get granular with it just so people can see, all the twists and turns.
Yeah, no, that was a great breakdown. And congratulations on getting it closed this week, right?
Yeah, it closed Tuesday. Yeah, this
Yeah,
past week. Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. There were a lot of great
Just,
takeaways there. So yeah, I think that was a great breakdown.
do you have any feedback or any thoughts that I missed?
No, I think that was a great breakdown. And I was just going to share kind of what you shared at the end, which is that when you have that happen, which unfortunately, if you're going to be in real estate, it's going to happen to you. Um, there's really, three options that you broke down, which is one, you can work with them, you can come up on your price. You could threaten them like to file a suit, or you can actually file a suit, or you can try to file a memorandum, but that's not really guaranteed to help you out. So typically, like you said, that the best option is to do what you did and to just work with them, because it's going to cost you more than that in money and time to try to sue someone. And it's always better to just make it a win-win anyway. So I think that was a great story and a great way to turn it around. And especially, sharing kind of your text conversation. I think that was awesome too. So yeah, I think that would definitely help some people that are dealing with that.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
You got
Well,
a deal story?
yeah, I had a pretty crazy one too. Um, so I'll try to keep this brief, but I had this deal that we finally closed this week, and it was very interesting. It was like, I think it was my first time ever dealing with a situation exactly like this. And so we had contracted with this, excuse me, um, with the seller who's, actually the seller, the owner of record. We contracted with her in July of last year, right? And she had an issue where, so she had tenants in the property that her story to us at least was that they were not paying her. There's no lease, and like she just hasn't been able to evict them. And so a lot of times we'll offer these sellers, like, let's say we run our numbers, and for example, we could offer them 50,000 for the property. Like if the house was vacant, for example, typically would discount it by like 20% to take over the eviction, because we have a handful of buyers that just don't care and they just do eviction all the time, and they're just like, well, I'll just do it. But they want it at a reduced price. And so that's what we did here. We were like, hey, we can offer you this amount if you're going to evict the tenants, or we can offer you this amount and we'll take over the eviction after closing. And so she chose plan B. Some sellers will go for it, even if it's like 10 or 20,000 less, because they just want rid of the headache. And
Yeah.
so we offer that anytime we run into that situation, which is quite often, unfortunately. It's like a lot of tenants just don't, they just turn
Yeah.
into squatters essentially. They stop paying you, they tear up your house, and they just don't care. And
Yeah.
so that's why we started offering that two-pronged approach, where it's like, hey, if you want to evict them, we'll pay you this price once it's vacant, or we'll do the eviction after closing, and but we'll have to pay you this lower price. Um, so, anyways, she took the lower price, and we got working on it and had it sold and everything like that. We were ready to close. And then what happened was the attorney found a court case, an open court case, and the tenant was suing the seller. And so the tenant was saying that, so basically the seller inherited this property from her late father, and the tenant said, oh, we had a lease to own with her father, and so we own this property, not you. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh,
And
that's a good
so
one.
and so they
I've
literally
never heard this one.
no, I've never had run into this before. And so they literally opened a court case, and this was ongoing. And they had a couple court dates, and it was just kind of getting delayed and delayed because they couldn't really choose, like the judge or whatever couldn't really choose which side to go with. And so this dude was adamant, like he had been living there, I think for a while, like 10 to 20 years. And
Wow.
he was like, I had this agreement with, her father, and I forgot her father's name, but I wouldn't mention it anyways. But anyways, he has agreement with her father, and he was like, it was lease to own. I've been making my payments. We own the house, not her. And so he called us up after he figured out, kind of what was going on. He called us up and he told me this whole story. He was very pissed off, not at me at all, but very pissed off at the seller, because he's like, she's trying to steal our house. Like, we own this house.
Wow.
But keep in
Wow.
mind, there's no recorded lease. There's no recorded rent to own in the register of deeds anywhere. There's no recorded like contract of any kind. And so he did send me a picture, and he sent it to our attorney as well, of like a really old, who knows if it was legit, lease to own document that said something like they were to pay $300 for over the course of 20 years or something, and then it was like a two-pager. It wasn't official, wasn't notarized, like none of that stuff. But this was the document he was holding on to. And so I was shocked because I thought that we could just like throw that out in the trash because it didn't seem legit. But then talking to this dude, like he was very, very serious. Like he either sold himself or he was telling the truth, so I couldn't really tell. I was like,
Yeah.
it sounds like it's the truth, he sounded like a nice guy. And he was just very upset with this lady because she inherited it and she was trying to, sell it and kick them out. And he was like, I'm not going down without a fight. Like, I'm gonna get this property. And he was like nice to me. He was just mad at her. He's like, I'm gonna get this property. Like, I'm saving your number. I'm gonna sell it to you. But once I get the property, I'm gonna sell it to you because this is my property. I was like, all right, dude. And so basically at that point, I was in contact with our closing attorney. They were like, there's really nothing we could do. There's an active court case, so we can't close on top of that. Like, we have to wait for a resolution. I was like, okay. And so basically we just terminated with the seller. And I was just like, look, I'm sorry. Like, this is what's going on. And she was pissed off. And I was like, I'm sorry. And so then we created like, two separate sellers in our Podio, and we were kind of just following up with them both each month, like, hey, any updates on the court case, like what's going on, and just kind of trying to hear them both out. And it was interesting because the one guy, the tenant or whatever, he was very friendly with us, always nice. And the other lady was either wouldn't answer the phone or was very short with us, like, no, like I don't want to talk to you about this, like, blah, blah, blah. And she was like very upset. And so anyways, it came all the way around to when did we get this? We got this recontracted in February of this year. So from July up until February,
So
we're
July of last year is when this started.
yeah. So July of last year is when we first contracted with the owner. She's owner. She's in the Register of Deeds as owner. She's on the county records as owner. So that's who we initially contracted with. And then come around to February. This is actually probably January when it started, but we contracted in February. But in January, we hear from the tenant's attorney. And so he reaches out to me and he's like, hey, like I've been in communication with both of these people. And I think we're coming to agreement. Like, can you do this price? And for clarity, we had offered something super low with the eviction. I think it was somewhere in the $50,000 to $60,000 range because we're handling the eviction. And this property is worth as is probably over 100,000, but we were just accounting for eviction, and so we'd like to give a huge buffer in that case. So anyway, so this seller or this attorney was like, hey, like they want to sell the property for this amount. I think it was like 120 or something, and they've agreed to just split the proceeds like 50-50.
Wow.
And I was like, that's awesome. And so at least we're making some headway there. And so I was like, well, we definitely can't do that. But basically we were kind of negotiating with the tenant and with his attorney because, like I said, the other seller like wouldn't answer our calls. He was very frustrated. And I guess maybe she assumed when people were calling her, they were calling about the court case because she seemed kind of like cagey when she would answer the phone. She's like, who's this? And we're like, dude, it's us. Like, relax. But anyways, and so then we went back and forth for a few weeks with the attorney, and we ended up agreeing on 94. And so both of these sellers would get 47, but then the tenant was paying his attorney out of his proceeds. So I think he was paying him some sort of commission or something for helping him out. And so anyways, we contracted it for 94. And I was actually going to buy this one because it was a pretty good deal, but we marketed it out first as I typically do, and then I ended up assigning it, which I typically do. But I probably should have bought it. In hindsight, it was a pretty good deal. It was a clean property because these tenants were actually, because they thought it was their property, they were taking great care of it, and we assumed it was torn up. That's why our initial offer was so low, because anytime we deal with this, the tenants tear up a property and it's just like, it's terrible. But since these people thought they owned the property, they took great care of it. They had actually put in like new cabinets, new appliances, new LVP flooring. Like, it was nice.
Why were they moving out? They were just ready to move, or they just had bad feelings because of this whole thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is just going to drag on forever, right? And so he was just, they were both just trying to get out of this. But yeah, so I don't really know who made out better here because like I don't know who technically owns the property. Technically it was her. And so anyways, but so we agreed on 94. Like I said, I think they started at 120, 130 or something. We got them to come down to 94. And then we marked it out, ended up assigning for on 111. So it was a good profit for us. And then we got to closing, and the tenant was asking like, oh, when do I sign? When do I sign? And we're like, well, you don't really own the property, so you don't have to sign. Like, the seller is just going to sign, and then you're going to get your half. And so we had to kind of smooth that with him a little bit because he was like, well, like I need to sign, like I need to get my money. And I was like, dude, like you're going to get your money. And so his attorney drafted just a proceeds disbursement, basically had them both sign and notarize it. So the original owner and then him, they both signed and notarized it. He gave that to our closing attorney. and then they did split the proceeds at closing. Um, and it was funny though, because even after we finally got it closed this past Monday is when we closed it, the seller was still like so pissed at us. And like after the fact, we always do, like I said, we kind of do like a closing call, like just thanking them for working with us and stuff. And she was just so upset, like not necessarily with us, but kind of with us. But she was just so upset that this dude ended up getting paid out of it. And I was like, well, it was either that or fight in court for like the rest of your life. So it's like you got
Yeah,
$47,000.
she didn't make that much less than you were going to pay her. You were going to pay her like 50 or 60 and she got 47. So
Yeah.
she's really
Yeah.
doing pretty well.
Yeah. I think we were at like 55 or something before.
Court battles or any of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But she was super frustrated. Her original frustration when we first signed the contract, she got mad at us because she was like 94,000. And I was like, yeah, well, we were agreeing to take over the eviction. We had no idea the condition of the property, all these other factors. And now when we contracted it the second time, they sent us pictures. It's in great condition, all this stuff. And so I was like, yeah, that's why we came up on a higher price. But she was mad because it's like, oh, you're paying 94 now, but you only offered me like 50 something. And so we had to explain that to her. But anyways, she totally did not leave us her 5-star review. She even sent in all caps, no review. And I was like, okay, better than a bad review. But the other dude,
No review on Google she did, or
no, like because we did the thank you call and then it's an automatic trigger when we close a deal, it sends them like a thank you text and like, hey, if you wouldn't mind, leave us a 5-star review. And she's like, no review in all caps. So that was pretty funny. But then the other dude did leave us a 5-star review, so that was sweet. He was a great guy to work with. It was very interesting, like the dichotomy of these people. It was very
yeah,
interesting.
it sounds like he was
But
telling the truth.
I think so.
He
I think
just
so.
didn't document it
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I think they just maybe had some sort of handshake agreement, back in the day, like and they just never recorded it properly. We see a lot of that, dealing with older sellers who maybe record a quick claim deed and they do it incorrectly, or they record like this lease to own agreement, they do it incorrectly. And so I think that's kind of I think that was what was going on. And I think that's why she was kind of cagey about it because she might have been in the wrong here. I don't want to cast stones, but that's just my judgment of it. But
Yeah.
anyways, we finally got to close this week, and so that was overall what was that like 7-8 months that we were working on this one in total. But since we recontracted it is about a month. We contracted in February and closed this week. So yeah, that was an interesting deal for me though. My first
That's
time
a
ever
great
dealing with something
story.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
That's
So
I've never heard that one before. That's a first.
yeah. So that was very interesting. But yeah, so now that we both shared our deal stories, we're gonna jump into tips, tools, and strategies. So do you have any tools or any tips that stood out to you from this week you want to share?
Uh I don't know if I have any. I thought I had a tool, but uh no, I don't think I do. I started using this probably isn't for everybody, but for calendar management, like if you want to have people book calls with you, and I do this mostly with hiring when we're doing interviews, people can book a call. And I was trying to use the Google thing, but then they want you to pay to upgrade. You can do like one scheduling link. Have you used Google Meet for this or no? Google Calendar.
No.
Well, Google Calendar will give you like a free scheduling link where you can set which times you're available, and then you can send the link to people and they can schedule in. But it was kind of difficult to work with, and then I deleted it and I couldn't find it again, and then they kept wanting me to pay for an upgrade into a Google. Anyway, I found this tool called Coalendar. It's like koala bear, but it's like the words koala and calendar mix, so it's like Koalendar, and it's great. It's free. It's really easy to use. You just log into it, set up an account, and you set up when you're available, and then you can send that link to anybody, and they can book an appointment with you. And you can set, the appointment length, all that stuff. You can put a couple of fields in there. So it's just a free scheduling tool. If anybody's looking for that, I'd recommend it. And yeah, that's the only one I had on my list for this week.
Yeah, that's awesome. I haven't heard of that. I use what's called Calendly. I don't know if you heard of that one, but
Yeah.
same thing. So but yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if I have anything to share. I don't think I do off the top, but that's a good share. But our next segment is to go over audience questions. So anything that people might have left in past episodes. Do you know if we have any comments there?
I don't think we do. I mean, let's see, community. I can do this fast now. Uh, so we got some comments on your video, Jasper, where we got the comment about your story and how it touched some people. So If you haven't listened to that one yet, check that out. It's titled Seven Figure Wholesale Tells All. It's episode 64, I believe, our podcast. But that's the one where I interviewed Jasper, and he shares his story from, when he started wholesaling till present, and how he built his business, and like what it took to get from working at Bojangles, and then TGI Fridays, and then Bar Taco, and then deciding to do this and take the plunge, and then really taking off and doing some deals and growing a big business. So that's we got some comments on that people appreciated that episode. And then what's this one? 45 to 50. A top wholesaler out of Miami, Florida pays 45 50K salary and 5 to 8% commission on deals. I guess that's a comment when we were talking about hiring and what to pay.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is on episode negotiating with sellers, insider tips, and deal breakdowns. So I guess that was last week's episode. A top wholesaler out of Miami, Florida pays 45 to 50K in salary and 5 to 8% commission on deals. Okay. I guess that's just a point of reference for that. I don't have any smarter contract. I understand this. You guys know of a website to scrub DNC or litigators?
Yeah, there's one called, I think it's called Blacklist, and there's Do Not Call Registry. I think it's called Blacklist. I could double check.
Okay.
But
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't have smarter contact or launch control. I understand those platforms have it built in. So that's what the commenter is saying.
okay.
Anyways, can I do that? How can I do that without having an account with them? And you said Blacklist, and what was the other one?
Yeah, it's called Blacklist Alliance. So you can use that one. And then there's another one just called Do Not Call. Um, but the Blacklist Alliance is the one I've heard of. I personally haven't used them just because Launch Control does it automatically. And
Yeah.
also what I used to use for Dialer, Mojo Dialer also does it automatically. But if you don't have any of those softwares, I would recommend this one, Blacklist Alliance. I've heard about that. I think from Brent Daniels is where I heard about that. So
Okay, it's a good answer. How can we find the legal language to find out if cold SMS or RVM is still legal in my state of Illinois? That's a good question. Matt Larson would be the guy to answer that. He's in Illinois, and he's a massive wholesaler. Has been doing it for 20 years. So to go on his Facebook group and ask that question, I would say, how can we find the legal language to find out if cold SMS or RVM is legal in my state of Illinois? Yeah, I would say try and comment or DM or reach out to Matt Larson on his Facebook group, right, Jasper? Wouldn't that be a good way to reach out to him?
yeah, I mean, I would say for that, we just touched on it a bit earlier, but Illinois is one of those states that's cracking down on wholesaling. So if you live there,
Yeah.
I would just recommend doing it in a different state. It doesn't seem like they want wholesalers right now. So me personally, I don't think SMS is illegal in any state because I personally get dozens every week from random people just spamming me. So I don't think SMS is illegal by any means, but I would not recommend wholesaling in Illinois because I think they're definitely cracking down on that. So as a great advice to reach out to Matt and anyone else who might be wholesaling in that state. But I would just say, like Matt Larson says, it's like we have 50 states to choose from. You can wholesale anywhere. So I would just recommend choosing a different state that's more easier, more wholesale friendly.
That's a great point because, if you're just doing virtual wholesaling anyway, I mean, pick a good state, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to do something more local, then do Indiana right next door. I don't know. I don't think they're
Yeah.
cracking down yet, are they? Right?
Yeah. And I think Matt does like the Quad Cities. So I think he does Iowa and like whatever those cities are, Iowa, Michigan, like a couple of those states. So
Yeah,
you can just do one
Michigan,
of those states
Indiana,
that's,
Iowa. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I would just choose a neighboring state or something or something totally across the country. It doesn't really matter. But yeah.
REI simply recently added AI for new calls that call into the CRM. Sounds pretty good. Let's see. I'm just scrolling through here, so be patient with me. Can we
Yeah,
still do?
I've heard of that CRM, but we both use Podio. I know my dad uses Just Call, which has AI features in calling. So uh,
Yeah.
yeah, right now I'm not looking to switch to another CRM, but I have heard good things about that REI Simply platform. So it seems like a good one.
Yeah, we're both on Podio right now, and as Jasper said, we've switched to Just Call for our business calling system and texting, and that's great. And it does have AI features, including an AI receptionist. It actually as you're creating a text, it shows you your tone and gives you suggestions, and has some other AI features that are pretty cool. But yeah, I don't have any experience with REI Simply either. And this is another RVM. Can we still do RVM blast, or is that now illegal? It's illegal to market with RVM in North Carolina. Jasper uses it for follow-up, and you can use it for people who have opted into your system. You can use it to communicate with them, but you can't do it cold in North Carolina. I don't know about other states. Do you have anything to add on that, Jasper?
No, no, that's great. That's great feedback. I think that pretty much is going across the board now. I think for cold call, SMS, RVM, like they're trying to have people that are only opt into your system. Obviously, neither of us are attorneys, so this is not legal advice. But yeah, I would just recommend not RVMing as a marketing strategy and only as a follow-up strategy if you're going to do it. So.
Yeah. And then this one is in my wheelhouse. Have you guys tried REI print mail for mailers? And we've talked about this, I think, on other podcasts, but yeah, we can go in more into direct mail, or I could do a separate video on direct mail. REI print mail has been my go-to. I find them to be very professional and on top of things. I first found out about them on Steve Treng's podcast, Real Estate Disruptors, and he had the founder on there, and the guy just knows his stuff. So that's when I started working with him then. And yeah, the campaign that I just mentioned at the top of this podcast, we got this deal from, and then closed it within a week. That came from an REI print mail campaign, and they have the check letter. They have a variety of different letter styles you can use there, and you'll be assigned a rep if you work with them, which I think is really cool. Like, I've always been able to have a rep that I can set up a call with, and they are very knowledgeable about markets and what's working in markets, which types of letter pieces are working, what volume you need to do to get a decent response rate, what response rates are. I definitely recommend them. We've also used Yellow Letter Shop, and they've been decent. I think the service at REI Print Mail is a little bit better. No shade on our Yellow Letter Shop. That's just my preference. So
Yeah, that's great feedback. Maybe we could do that on our next episode when you're leading, because I think I'm interested in it. I'm honestly thinking about doing direct mail myself now, so I think that'd be a good segment.
All right. Yeah, we can do it. I'm leading next time, so we could just do that as a topic. Just
Yeah,
talk about direct mail a little bit. Uh, and I think that's the end of the comments and questions for this week. I think we covered it all. Thanks for participating in the cool wholesaling community here, and leaving us your comments and questions and stuff. We love it. We love to interact and feedback and help people as much as we can. So yeah, that's the end of it, Jasper.
awesome. I love that. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for leaving all the comments and questions. That was great. So feel free to drop your comments and questions on this episode or any others that you like. And also, if you have any feedback, I think this is our second week doing our new format. So if you guys like the new format, or if you don't, just feel free to leave us comments below, and we'll be happy to adjust if needed. And typically, we're wrapping it up now with book or podcast, or if you have any quotes or anything you want to share. Anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, I had a couple of things that I was going to drop in. One is this is not real estate related; it's mindset related. But one of the people I look to for mindset stuff a lot is Naval Ravikant, and I listened to one of his today, which was like get ahead of 99% of people. And I can't really speak a ton to the content of it. It's a really great video, and I really loved it. He's very quotable, but here's two things that I clipped from that and wrote down in my little quotes thing. Um, Three things that can't be bought, that money can't buy: a fit body, a calm mind, and a house full of love.
Yeah.
And that's Naval. And then another thing he said that I wrote down in that one was the more seriously you take yourself, the less happy you're going to be.
That's a good
Uh,
one.
Stay light. Yeah. And so I did do a little bit of consuming of somebody that we're not allowed to mention anymore because we mentioned them too much. But I'll just mention one takeaway: that I've been getting a newsletter from a guru who teaches about business growth, whose initials are AH. And he had a tidbit about sales in his newsletter this week that was 8 seconds. Did you get this, Jasper? The 8 second pause. And I just
Yeah.
love that because I teach my team that too, is just like, shut up, be quiet, listen, but also, whoever talks first in negotiations loses, right? That's an age old sales um, bit of wisdom. So that he was saying that they tested it with their sales reps, and 8 seconds is the sweet spot. You just, you ask for the sale, or ask for the sale basically, and then you just are quiet for 8 seconds. And normally that's enough time for the other person to pipe in, but it's just an opportunity to be uncomfortable. And I also am enjoying those helping business owners grow their business videos. But again, we won't go down that road.
Yeah.
So I'll stop with that.
No, that's great. I'm glad you touched on that because I forgot about that, but I remember reading that email. That was a great tip. So
Yeah.
I love that. And I got one from his wife, who I won't name, but she has the same thing, email list. And she had one about hiring this week, which I thought was really good. And so she talked about the 3P framework for deciding if you need to hire someone else. And I thought that was really good. And so what she said is that before you're hiring someone else, think about these three questions to yourself. Number one, is this a process? So are you looking to hire because you're lacking a process that, someone else on your team could take over if you documented it properly? Number two, is this a project? So that means, like, is this a short-term fix where you just need to allocate more time or resources to this for maybe 1 or 2 months rather than hiring a full-time person? And then number three, or is this a person, which in that case, hire them. Like, is this something where you need a full-time role to actually address this issue in your business? So I thought that was good. Just going through those first two questions first, like, can I solve this with putting a process in place to make it easier for my team? Can I solve this by doing a short sprint, whether it's 2 weeks, 2 months, to kind of address this, or do I actually need a full-time hire? So I really like that. And then I love the 8 second thing you shared. And then I just finished the book Essentialism that I think I touched on last week, but I forget the author now. I think it's Greg McCown, I think is his name. But if you look up Essentialism, I really like that book. It just talks all about removing things from your life rather than adding on. And a lot of times that can be more beneficial and help you get more stuff done when you remove stuff from your life, from your calendar, from your business, rather than adding stuff in. So I thought that was a really good read. I definitely recommend that one. And now I just restarted The Psychology of Money. I read that one last year and I liked it. So I'm just reading that one over again. But yeah, those are the two books that I've read in the past week. So
Cool.
yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that's it for today. We touched on a lot of stuff, but I hope everyone got value out of that, and drop your comments or questions for next week. And I think we're going to be going over direct mail with my dad leading the charge there. So that's exciting. And make sure to tune in for that. And yeah, thanks for watching.
Yeah. Let us know what you think of the new format. We flipped it around, put the real estate up at the front.